After Prince Philip passed away, his family expressed their grief, but what Queen Elizabeth shared was especially heartbreaking. It's said that in private, she admitted his death left a huge void in her life. While it's hard to imagine Prince Philip as anything other than the British consort, surprisingly, he wasn't British at all. He was born into both the Greek and Danish royal families on the Greek island of Corfu on June 10, 1921. His path to becoming Queen Elizabeth's husband was marked by tragedy, drama, and controversy. Though Philip had royal blood, his childhood wasn't the fairy tale one might expect. He was born during a time of great unrest in Greece, and his family was directly impacted by the chaos. In the aftermath of the Greco-Turkish War, Greece was in turmoil, and a military revolt in 1922 forced Philip's family into a precarious situation. His uncle, King Constantine Nereides, was forced to abdicate, and Philip's father, Prince Andrew, was imprisoned. When Philip was still just a toddler, the situation reached a critical point. Fearing for their lives, the Greek royal family fled to France. In fact, things were so dire that they had to smuggle baby Philip out of Greece in a fruit crate. Despite this dramatic start to life, Philip's journey only became more extraordinary. Growing up in France, he attended the Elms, an American school where he earned a reputation as a smart, know-it-all type, but one who was always polite. During the 1930s, Philip moved between schools in England, Scotland, and Germany. His sharp wit and royal charm made him quite the heartthrob, and of course being a prince didn't hurt either. During his childhood, Philip had very little contact with his mother, Princess Alice of Battenberg. The reason? Amid the Greco-Turkish conflict, Alice began to believe she was receiving divine messages and had the power to heal. She was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia and spent Philip's formative years in a sanatorium in Switzerland. World War II brought further hardship, leaving Princess Alice impoverished. By the time the occupying forces left Athens in October 1944, Princess Alice was reportedly living in squalid conditions. Meanwhile, in the late 1930s, tensions were rising across Europe as World War II loomed. During this time, Philip's family made some questionable decisions that would later create some awkward silences at family gatherings. 4 of Philip's sisters, yes, 4, married high-ranking German princes, placing them squarely within the upper ranks of the Third Reich. One of these sisters, Princess Cecilia, was not only one of Philip's siblings but also his favorite. However, tragedy struck in November 1937. Cecilia died in a horrific plane crash, along with her husband, 2 sons, and mother-in-law, essentially wiping out much of Philip's extended family on that side. To make matters even worse, Cecilia had been pregnant with her 4th child at the time. She had gone into labor mid-flight, and the resulting chaos likely contributed to the crash as the pilot attempted to land in poor weather conditions. Philip, only 16 at the time, had already experienced an overwhelming amount of loss and devastation. If he believed his family was cursed, he had good reason to think so. Despite these tragedies, Prince Philip was a man of duty and action, traits that only intensified as he grew into an ambitious young man. In 1939, he enlisted to fight in World War II, further demonstrating his unwavering commitment to serving his country. Of course, Philip's involvement in World War II also meant he found himself in direct conflict with at least 2 of his brothers-in-law, Prince Christoph of Hesse and Berthold, Margrave of Baden. Despite this, Philip emerged from the war as a naval hero, and he was about to meet his destiny. When Prince Philip first met his future wife, Elizabeth, he was only 18 and she was just 13 years old. Even at that young age, Elizabeth was completely smitten, falling head over heels for her prince. The future Queen Elizabeth II made it clear that she would have no one but Philip. While this might sound a bit strange by today's standards, it was relatively normal for royalty. In fact, the British royal family is not known for making particularly wise decisions when it comes to marriage, and in the case of Philip and Elizabeth, the young couple had to be kept apart. Elizabeth's father, King George VI, made Philip promise to wait until Elizabeth turned 21 before they could marry, just in case she changed her mind. However, the king may have had other concerns as well. Initially, George wasn't too fond of Philip. First, There was the issue of optics. George wasn't sure how the public would react to the idea of his daughter, the heir to the British throne, marrying a Greek prince. Then there was Philip's brash, straightforward manner, which suited a naval officer but didn't sit well with the more refined king. Perhaps that's why the royal family made a significant demand of Philip before allowing him to marry Elizabeth. He had to become fully British. As his relationship with Elizabeth grew more serious, Philip renounced all his Greek and Danish titles, adopting his mother's family name, Mountbatten, and becoming a naturalized British subject. Only then could he officially become engaged to Elizabeth. On November 20th, 1947, Prince Philip finally married his princess, and he and Elizabeth tied the knot in the grand setting of Westminster Abbey. The ceremony was broadcast by the BBC via radio to a massive global audience of 200 million listeners. In the pre-television era, before the blockbuster TV broadcast of Prince Charles and Diana's wedding, those were impressive numbers. However, something significant was missing from the big day. Despite the enormous global attention, none of Philip's 3 surviving sisters attended the wedding. Given that World War II had only recently ended, and all 3 sisters were still married to German princes, their presence would have been problematic. Understandably, guests like that were not welcome at the palace. In fact, none of Philip's German relatives were invited. The only Germans present were the British royal family themselves, a fact that highlights the complexity of royal ancestry. Despite being firmly tied to Britain, the royal family's German roots were undeniable. As the saying goes, "We're British, aren't we?" Well, actually, no, we're German. Even Queen Victoria, Philip's great-great-grandmother, was of German descent. Philip himself was the 5th male consort of a reigning British queen, following in the footsteps of others like Philip II of Spain, William II, Prince George of Denmark, and Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's consort. While Philip was often known for his straightforward and occasionally brusque manner, he had a deep love for Queen Elizabeth, which was evident from the beginning of their marriage. One early example of this devotion was his wedding day gift to her. On the morning of their wedding, Philip quit smoking as a gesture of love and commitment, a personal sacrifice that meant more than any material gift. Speaking of gifts, while Princess Diana's blue sapphire engagement ring is now one of the most famous in the world and currently sits on Kate Middleton's finger, Queen Elizabeth's engagement ring also carries a touching backstory of its own. Philip designed Queen Elizabeth's engagement ring using diamonds from his mother's tiara, and even crafted a bracelet from the leftover stones. In 1948, the couple welcomed their first child, Prince Charles, after a grueling 30-hour labor, but Philip wasn't present for the birth. Instead, he passed the time playing squash and swimming with a friend. He was drying off when a footman finally informed him that his son had been born. No one is fully prepared to be a father, and given Philip's own dysfunctional upbringing, it's not surprising that he faced some challenges in raising his children. His first reaction upon seeing baby Charles wasn't exactly warm. Reportedly, Philip looked at his newborn son and said, "He looks like a plum pudding." This was typical of Philip's blunt, unfiltered humor, a hallmark of his personality throughout his life. Prince Charles and his sister Princess Anne had notoriously distant childhoods, as their parents were often preoccupied with their royal duties. In fact, Charles later admitted that it was the nursery staff who taught him how to play and tended to his emotional needs, not his father. Philip, having grown up in a harsh, survival of the fittest environment, was not one to show much affection. Instead, he imposed strict discipline and often belittled Charles and Anne in an attempt to toughen them up. Father and son struggled to form a close bond, with Philip's stern parenting style creating further distance between them. In contrast, his relationship with Princess Anne was much closer. Anne, known for her sturdy, no-nonsense personality, had much in common with her father's pragmatic nature, making her his favorite. This bond remained strong, even after the birth of Philip's younger sons. No wonder Philip struggled, especially with sons like his. However, despite his challenges as a father, he was about to face another major upheaval. After his royal marriage, Philip's already fast-paced life accelerated even more. On February 6, 1952, while he and Elizabeth were on a Commonwealth tour, they received news that would forever alter their lives. Elizabeth's father, King George VI, had passed away, and she was now Queen Elizabeth II, making Philip her royal consort. Although Philip and Elizabeth had been getting along well, tensions began to surface almost immediately after her coronation. One major issue was the question of what to name her royal house. Tradition had Philip pushing for the House of Edinburgh in his honor, but this idea was swiftly rejected. Prime Minister Winston Churchill himself vetoed it, and Philip's reaction was far from gracious. It was beginning to dawn on Philip that he had married a woman who would forever outrank him, and he didn't take this realization lightly. While he kept a brave face in public, things were reportedly much different in the privacy of Buckingham Palace. The inner turmoil caused by this power dynamic likely weighed heavily on him, leading to speculation that Queen Elizabeth made a significant concession to ease her husband's discontent. For the first part of her reign, Philip remained simply the Duke of Edinburgh. But eventually, this changed, with Elizabeth granting him the title of Prince, a gesture many believe was aimed at soothing some of the strain in their marriage. In 1957, Elizabeth officially elevated her husband to the title of Prince Consort of the United Kingdom. A happy husband equals a happy life, or so she thought. While Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth enjoyed an incredibly long marriage, the longest of any British monarch and their consort, it wasn't without its share of scandal. Early in their union, dark rumors began to circulate. Whispers suggested that Prince Philip had a wandering eye, and his timing couldn't have been worse. One of the most persistent rumors was that Philip had an affair with actress Pat Kirkwood, with whom he reportedly exchanged letters and paid visits to in 1948, while Elizabeth was pregnant with Prince Charles. Though the palace has always denied these claims as baseless gossip, Kirkwood offered a different perspective. While she maintained that nothing intimate happened between them, she didn't rule out the possibility that Philip had other intentions. That said, many who knew Philip agree that, although he noticed attractive women, it never went beyond looking. Philip himself addressed these rumors, pointing out that his constant security detail would have made it impossible for him to carry out any sort of affair. Believe it or not, Elizabeth and Philip's reign began just as television was gaining prominence. As a result, Philip became the first member of the royal family to be interviewed on TV, marking the start of a new era for the monarchy. In 1961, one hot topic of conversation was Prince Philip's take on Commonwealth Technical Training Week, where he advocated for more skilled workers in the labor force, an idea that still seems more relevant than much of what you'd find on Netflix today. Throughout his years as consort, Philip often found himself in hot water, and not just over his own rumored relationships. He was also said to have meddled in the affairs of his extended family, most notably when Princess Margaret attempted to marry, then later broke things off with her lover Peter Townsend. Many believed Philip's disapproval played a significant role in their split. On a lighter note, it's worth mentioning that Philip reportedly wasn't a fan of tea, a staple of British life, but instead preferred black coffee, quite the madman. As Prince Charles reached marrying age, both Philip and Queen Elizabeth wanted him to make a proper match, with their sights set on the young, innocent, and well-bred Lady Diana Spencer. In hindsight, we know that this was a disastrous decision, as Charles remained deeply in love with his ex, Camilla Parker Bowles. What's less known is Philip's involvement in the situation. Always the decisive figure, Philip pushed Charles to make a choice. In 1981, Philip even wrote a letter to his son, urging him to either propose to Diana or end the relationship for good. Under pressure from his father, Charles and Diana married just 6 months later. The tragic end of this story came in 1997, when the world was rocked by the news that Diana, Princess of Wales, had died in a horrific car crash in Paris. In 1997, just a year after her divorce from Prince Charles, the royal family was deeply divided over how to respond to Princess Diana's tragic death. They struggled with how to act both as members of the monarchy and as family. However, one person wasn't at a loss: Philip. At Princess Diana's funeral, Her grandsons, William and Harry, were hesitant to walk behind their mother's coffin. Philip stepped in to support them, showing his ability to be present when it mattered most. Those who admired Prince Philip often noted how down-to-earth he was, a straightforward military man. He believed in looking people in the eye. A former White House butler even recalled a visit in 1979 when Philip struck up a conversation with him and a co-worker, going so far as to pour their drinks himself. However, Philip's informality could sometimes backfire. Over the years, he became infamous for his witty remarks, some of which were considered offensive while others were simply rude. Philip was fully aware of his reputation and took it in stride with good humor. Still, his bluntness didn't sit well with everyone. For instance, there was a minor scandal in 1959 when he made comments implying that Canadian children were out of shape. Yet, his candor also won him admirers, like the tribe on the island of Vanuatu in the South Pacific, who believed Philip to be a god, perhaps because they had never heard him speak. When Philip learned about the Prince Philip movement, it was suggested he send them a signed portrait. He did, and in return, the grateful villagers sent him a pig-killing club. Amused, Philip responded with another photo, this time posing with the club, much like his grandson Prince Harry would later do. Prince Philip had a passion for flying, and in fact, he was the first member of the British royal family to fly a helicopter. He had been flying airplanes since 1952, and by the time he reached his 70th birthday, he had logged over 5,000 hours as a pilot. But flying wasn't his only skill. Philip was also a prolific author, writing several books on topics such as environmentalism, horses, and wildlife. Some of his works include Selected Speeches 1948 to 1955, Birds from Britannia, and Survival or Extinction, a Christian attitude to the environment. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't have the typical worries of everyday life. If that weren't enough, Philip was also an oil painter. English artist and writer Hugh Casson once described his work as exactly what one would expect: straightforward, bold, with strong colors and vigorous brushstrokes. Indeed, Philip seemed like the kind of man who would paint with such energy and directness. Throughout their long marriage, Philip and Queen Elizabeth walked a shared path, and those who knew them say they remained deeply in love. A royal dresser once shared a sweet moment when she was hemming one of the Queen's gowns, and Philip walked in, commenting, nice dress." The Queen blushed, showing just how much Philip's compliment still meant to her. Before his health began to decline, Philip made headlines after Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's interview with Oprah, during which the couple claimed a prominent royal had expressed concerns about their baby's skin color. Given Philip's reputation for speaking his mind, many assumed he was the family member in question. However, Meghan and Harry quickly clarified that it wasn't Philip. Even in his later years, Philip was one of the hardest-working members of the royal family, outpacing younger royals like Prince William. In 2016, at the age of 96, Philip logged 110 days of public engagements, making him the fifth busiest royal that year. His golden years were filled with dedication and energy. On April 9, 2021, after months of health issues, Prince Philip passed away at the age of 99, just 2 months shy of his 100th birthday. In true Philip fashion, he requested a funeral with no fuss, a fitting end for a man known for his straightforward nature. That's all for today's news. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel so we can bring you more stories.